G'day coppers, welcome back to the bush. In this episode of Lockups for Driving, we'll be doing a leak down test on Maddie's 80 series. Now you might have already seen our compression testing video, and in Maddie's 80 series, number 2 was down to 180 PSI. In comparison with the rest of the cylinders, 1 through 6, with the exemption of number 2, we're sitting at about 470 to 490 PSI. So good compression there, except for number 2. So we need to work out where our compression's going. And for that, we're going to use a leak down tester. But before we get into that, let's have a look at where our compression could possibly be going. Now, you may well have heard of suck, squeeze, bang, blow, or induction, compression, power and exhaust strokes. Now that's for various 4 strokes of a 4-cycle engine, and we're not going into great detail in this episode about the 4 cycles of a 4-stroke engine. If you want to know more about that, click the link in the description and it goes right through it in my diesel compression testing video. But back to the task at hand. So this is the compression stroke, and our piston is heading north up towards our cylinder head. We've got our cylinder walls here, our piston rings just above that. That dotted line represents our head gaskets. So that's sealing the block with our cylinder walls here to our head. And we have the inlet port here with our inlet valve. Now inlet valve is shut. And we have an exhaust valve here with our exhaust port or exhaust track, and you'll also notice that one is shut on our compression stroke. And we have our highly compressed mixture here of fuel and air ready to burn. Okay, so you'll notice what we're doing here is we're putting compressed air into this section with a leak down tester, and we're seeing where it's going to leak. Now if we're hearing noise out of the exhaust port, it could be leaking past the sides of the exhaust valve, in between the exhaust valve and the exhaust valve seat. And if it's leaking past there, you'll hear the noise coming out of your tailpipe, because that heads off to your tailpipe. Or if it's leaking through your inlet because your inlet valve seal is bad, down on the seat here, or maybe the valve isn't seating fully, you'll hear air coming out this way. Now if we're getting bubbles, let's say, into the coolant tract, maybe the head gasket is compromised and it's leaking compression into a water gallery, because there's water galleries that run in between the block and the head, or perhaps it's leaking past the rings down into our crankcase here, and then that will pressurize our crankcase obviously, and we'll be able to see it and hear it through the dipstick and through the 710 cap, or the oil cap in the top of your valve cover. Furthermore, it could be, and we hope it's not this, a hole in the top of the piston, because if there's a hole in the top of the piston, all this pressurized gas here that we'll be artificially filling up with our leak down tester will end up in our crankcase. Now we know what we're looking for, let's get on with the process. So now we've got a better idea where our compression could have actually leaked to. Now we need to work out exactly where it's gone. But first up, we need to work out how to use a leak down tester. So let's have a look at that now. So I've got a leak down tester here. Now this is a flea-based special, so the quality might vary a little bit. Anyway, we've got the pressure gauge here. We've got our leakage tester here. We've got our pressure regulator here. Of course, that's the air inlet. This is the end which is connected to the cylinder, whether via the spark plug or in this case the glow plug because it's diesel. And we'll be able to simulate leakage with a blowgun there. So what we do is we've got 100 PSI in the airline here. We'll just connect that up. And then we use the regulator to set the gauge. And we need to get it set on 0. Or thereabouts. Anywhere in the yellow set bit will work. But being a bit of a pedant, try and get it on as close to 0 as possible. Now you've got it set on 0, and we've got the air regulator set up. We can lock off the air regulator by pushing up on that button there. You'll hear it click into place, and then we can connect our cylinder to our leak down tester. Now at the moment it's showing no leakage at all, but if we get the blowgun and start leaking it, anywhere in the green's pretty good. So you're always going to leak a little bit of compression past the rings. There's never 100% seal, so anywhere around the 20% mark is pretty good. But if you're into the yellow, or even worse, into the red, well, you've got a problem and you need to sort out where that problem is. And the great thing about the leak down tester is you can work out exactly where it's leaking. Is it leaking into the crankcase? Is it leaking into the radiator? Is it leaking out the exhaust valves? Is it leaking out the inlet valve? And we'll show you how to set it up and run it now. Here we are back on the side of the engine. Now, unlike a compression test where you just pull all the spark plugs, or in this case glow plugs out because it's a diesel engine, bung it in, turn the engine over for 5 seconds and you got your reading, we need to make sure the piston, as it was showing before in the diagram, that it is at the top of its travel. Not only that, you've got to remember this is a 4-stroke engine, so it does 2 revolutions per power stroke. So you need to make sure it's at the top of its travel, but also on the compression stroke as opposed to the exhaust stroke. So the way we do that, well, we're cheating here because we can actually see down this hole here, you might have a bit of trouble seeing that on the video, the inlet valve, the back of the inlet valve. And you can see the compression stroke because it opens up the inlet valve. So what you can do is you can get a little bit of tissue paper and make sure that the tissue paper, when you're winding the engine over by hand, there's compression coming out and moving the tissue paper around. So that's one way to make sure you're on a compression stroke. The other way, of course, is to make sure that you've got your valve shut there so you'll know you'll be on the compression stroke. You want to get it right at the top. So what I do is I get something that's not going to damage the inside of the cylinder, and this is just a wire tie with little black marks on there to make it a little bit more visible. And you pot him down there, push him against the end of the piston. There he is there. And I'll get Matt to wind him over clockwise, the way the engine normally turns, until we get to the very top. So when you're ready, Matt, can you wind him over clockwise? And you can see it coming up there. A little bit more, please. And it'll dwell when it's at the top. A little bit more, please. All right, now it's going back down, so we need to wind it backwards a little bit. Come back up. A little bit more, please. Well, okay, and a little bit more forward to make sure we're right at the top there. Okay, and that'll do there. So now we know that the piston, she's right up the top of the bore there. So we know we're at top dead center on the compression stroke. So we can actually do the compression test, the leak down test, sorry, now, because we know both the inlet and the exhaust valves are both shut. Right now, let's show you how we're going to connect her up. Just like before when we were doing the compression test, you need an adapter for either your spark plug or in this case your glow plug. And we got ours here to suit the Toyota, so we'll just wind him on down. Make sure you don't cross thread him, of course. Now you just need a hand tight to get a decent seal there. You don't need a 200-pound gorilla levering off the end of a breaker bar. Just hand tight will do. It's always worked for me in the past, and it'll probably work for me in the future. Rightio, now we grab our adapter cable and we'll just simply push that on till it clicks. There we go, onto the end of our glow plug. Now it's time to actually do the leak down test. Rightio, now it's actually time to start performing the leak down test. So we need to connect our 100 PSI airline here to the gauge, and then we need to adjust that right hand gauge until we're back on the 0 mark. There we go, it looks pretty good from here. So now we can connect up the gauge to our glow plug. That might take 2 hands. Rightio, so we're all connected up now. Now this is cylinder number 1, the one we weren't having any issues with. And you can see that's in the low region there, so that's where we want it. But what we can do now is set out and find out where our compression or our pressure from the leak down tester is actually going. So if it's going into the crankcase, you'll be able to feel pressure or air coming out of here. Now it's normal to get a little bit, especially out of the crankcase. The piston rings aren't going to seal up 100% at all. So you'll get a little bit out of there, and you can go around, you can have a listen. Maybe you need to pull out the dipstick, and that will also indicate pressure into the crankcase. if there's pressure coming from the head gasket into the water galleries, or perhaps there's a cracked head and it's leaking into the water galleries, well, you'll be able to see bubbles coming up through your radiator. If there's an issue with the seal in your inlet valve, this one down in here, you'll be able to hear it coming out of here. Or if there's pressure going from the exhaust valve because you've got an issue with an exhaust valve, well, you'll be able to hear it coming out of the exhaust right at the tailpipe. So you'll be able to hear exactly where that compression is leaking out, and it'll give you a better indication to where the issue actually lies. So just for comparison's sake, now we know number 2 is causing an issue, but we don't know where. And we can't hear anything coming out the inlet here. There's nothing coming out the tailpipe. There's next to nothing coming out of here, though there is a little bit. If we put a hand on there for a second to build up a little bit of pressure. And yeah, there was a little bit coming out, but it's a negligible amount. So we're getting a little bit of leakage into the crankcase, but nothing. All right, now we've done that one, let's try number 2. Okay, so we're back on number 2 and we've found top dead center on the compression stroke of number 2. Now I'll just put the adapter on the glow plug down there. And of course, first we have to set this back to the 0 mark. And we're back onto the 0 mark. Now I'm starting to suspect that this gauge actually isn't too accurate. It's a flea bay special, and as I say, you pay for what you get. But we'll be able to tell where the air's going regardless. So we'll plug them up together. Now, it's still telling me it's low leakage, and if we had lots of leakage, it should be in the high or at least the moderate mark. But like I say, I'm starting to suspect that this gauge isn't 100% accurate. But that's all right, because the main thing is we can see where the air's going. So I've been to the tailpipe and I couldn't hear anything coming out of there, so it tells me my exhaust valve seat, and my exhaust valve is pretty good. I can't hear anything coming out of the inlet pipe there, the inlet port, sorry. So the valve there is good and the valve seat and seal is good. But I can hear noise coming out of the crankcase. Now if we have a look at, I can actually feel that. Now if I just lay that on top, you should be able to see that moving, that our 710 cap moving all by its lonesome. So that tells me we're leaking air into the crankcase, because it wasn't doing that on number 1, and we know we've got a compression issue on number 2, and now we can see where that compression's going, and that compression's leaking into our crankcase. So that's narrowed it down for us. It tells me that the seal on the head is good. There's compression leaking into the crankcase, so that leaves us with bad head gasket, unfortunately broken rings, or a hole in the piston. That's the only way the compression feasibly, without any major damage like a split bore or something drastic like that, could be getting into the crankcase. So ladies and gents, unfortunately that means it's head off time for this vehicle. Anyway, I digress. Matt's not looking happy. If you could see him in the camera right now, you'd see a broken man with his broken 80 series.
And his broken wallet.
And he's about to be broken wallet. Anyway, all right guys, so that's the result. Our compression test has led us to our leak down test, and our leak down test is telling us, obviously, that our compression is leaking into the crankcase, and she's coming out the top here. Bugger. All right guys, so that's a leak down test performed with a leak down tester. In comparison with a compression test. Now a compression test is like a general fault warning light on your dashboard. It tells you there's an issue, but doesn't tell you exactly where it is. It says, yes, we have a sealing issue, but where it is, no idea. Whereas your leak down tester is like a scan gauge tool. You connect it up and it tells you what the issue is. So it can tell you whether there's a compression issue that's leaking out of your inlet valve seat, getting past your inlet valve, and you can hear that, or perhaps into your crankcase like I suspect this one is, or maybe even compression leaking into your coolant cavity. There you'll get bubbles out of your radiator. Anyway guys, if you like this video, don't forget to give it the old thumbs up. And if you didn't, by all means, give it a thumbs down. Not thrice, but twice. Thanks guys. We'll see you in the next one. So if you've enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell icon. It's really important to us and you won't miss out on our future content. Now if you want to support the channel, by all means, consider becoming a patron on Patreon and you get things like early access to our videos on YouTube. Either way, we hope to see you out on the tracks.